Greetings, ladies and gents, and welcome to this latest edition of Tales from Outer Space, where I take stories from across the internet and read them for your entertainment. This particular story is called Welcome to Certain Death Holidays, written by TheStabbyBrit. If at the end of the story you have enjoyed it, I would be honored if you hit the like button and the subscribe button. Anyways, more importantly, let's head into the story. Thrill seekers. No utterance in all of human history is more terrifying than I am bored. To understand why, you need only look into human history. In ancient times, when the earliest empires finally conquered so much land, there were places that you could live without fear of barbarian invasion. Humanity discovered boredom. A bored man turned to his colleague and said, "Cecilius, sir, you are adept with a sword. How would you like to wear some leather underpants and wave your sword around while everyone watches?" This is how gladiators were born. Probably. Everywhere and much later, other ways to conquer boredom were invented. One day, an Austrian, not that one, was bored. He decided to go for a walk, and in an attempt to make things more interesting, he went for a walk in the snow, uphill. Once he got to the top, he was tired, but still bored. Then he thought, I wonder if I'd still be bored if I strapped 2 planks of wood to my feet and jumped off the cliff. Thus was born skiing, which remains the most intense form of standing still ever developed. Later, another Austrian, still not that one, decided to throw himself off the mountain next door while he sat on a tea tray, and thus the toboggan was born. Perhaps you're wondering what's so terrible about all of this? Well, let me tell you. In their attempt to conquer boredom, the Roman gladiatorial arenas killed thousands, stabbed, clubbed, eaten by wild animals, and that wasn't even the worst of it. The less said about that thing with the bull, the better. The Austrians and their love of jumping off cliffs in increasingly stupid ways resulted in innumerable young men and women meeting an early end following a high-speed collision with a tree or a rock or each other. Worst of all, they exported their ideas to Germany. And as any history student knows, the moment Germany gets involved, the whole world goes to hell in a handbasket. Eventually, after 3 world wars, a robot uprising, a nuclear apocalypse, and an invasion by lizard people from the moon, humanity finally achieved enlightenment. The Terran Federation brought everyone under a unified world government to live in peace and prosperity. And it was actual peace and prosperity, not the dystopian, authoritarian nightmare all the edgy sci-fi authors predicted. Humanity was at peace. They were journeying into the stars in the spirit of discovery, cooperation, and eternal friendship, and they were getting bored. The experts all agreed there was a crisis looming. After all, there was only so long Call of Duty 568, Infinite Cold War, Space Future Void, World War II could keep people sedated. One day, XXX Poon Slammer 420XXX was going to grow up and move out of his mother's basement. And if the edgy comments he made on social media, as of the age of 13 years old, were anything to go by, him and the rest of his generation were absolutely going to become xenophobic space Nazis and conquer the universe because there wasn't anything better to do on a Saturday night. Something had to be done. Enter the supposed solution, the salvation of the galaxy, certain death holidays. For the thrill seekers of humanity, what could be more thrilling than something that you cannot possibly survive? Sunbathing on Mercury, skinny dipping on Neptune, the possibilities were terminal. Now, you might think nobody would ever be so stupid as to do something like this. But let me point out the following. In the 21st century, the highest point on Earth was Mount Everest, and you had to queue to reach the peak. And there were frozen corpses either side of the queue. The thrill seekers of humanity demand a challenge, and they will not settle for safe. And you know what? It worked. Cruise liners full of crazy idiots went off to do something terminally stupid, and the rest of the human race breathed a sigh of relief and enjoyed a celebratory pint that another generation of lunatics had removed themselves from the grand equation of life. It was Darwinism in action, thanks to certain death holidays. The only people who lived long enough to have children were the sort of human whose idea of living dangerously was going to the pub without the wife's permission. There would be no grand catastrophes, no interstellar conflicts, no dramatic upheavals that completely rewrote the destiny of all creation. But was that a really good thing? This was the question humanity asked itself. Because, although exploring in the name of peace and cooperation, just like the prophet Roddenberry predicted we would, had its benefits, and humanity had achieved luxury space communism, and nobody ever had to live a hard life if they didn't want to, there was a certain doubt, let's call it. As a species, the human race was left with the distinct impression something was askew. Invariably, whenever someone tried to articulate the sensation, they'd look to the lunatics, the ones boarding the ships of certain death holidays, the ones whose answered, "Yes, please," when asked if they'd like to go bungee jumping into a surface of the sun. Now remember, when I said certain death holidays was a supposed solution. Now, about a week ago, certain death holidays finished their 300th cruise. This one was a bit of a different from the others, because for the first time ever, a tourist came back. He stepped off the ship with the worst case of sunburn anyone had ever experienced, or more precisely, experienced and lived to tell of it. And as he descended the ramp from the luxury space cruiser and approached the assembled media, he gave a wide grin and said, "That was the best holiday ever! I can't wait to tell the guys at work about it." We have no idea what's going to happen now. By all accounts, Trevor Regis, 24 from Wolverhampton, should have been reduced to a very tiny lump of charcoal in the sun's corona. But now he's back, sharing photos on social media. And he's been posting about how he's thinking of a change of career. Apparently, executive vice chairman of adding salad to Big Macs isn't exciting enough for him now. No one knows what terror he will unleash upon the universe in the years to come, but we can be sure that it won't be boring. End of story. Story number 2, The Flowering, written by PodgeWrites. 2438 BCE. A bioweapon is launched towards a forgettable solar system in a typical galaxy by beings whose grasp of physics, biology, and chemistry is very nearly divine. It'll take millennia to reach its intended target, a blue-green world whose oxygen-rich atmosphere is evident of life. 1995 CE. The weapon begins to decelerate as it approaches the solar system, shedding its hull of organic materials as vast stores of reaction mass are used up. A few astronomers on the blue-green world note an unusual object in the Kuiper Belt, but the budget for time on a Better's telescope array is not forthcoming. 2018. The object impacts Earth, landing in the Mojave Desert. The event is witnessed only by a small group of tourists and a passing coyote. Incubation begins. 2020. The first confirmed neural infestations of lower organisms are detected by biologists at UNLV. The infected animals display constant signs of agitation when alone or among uninfected individuals, and notable lethargy when near their infected fellows. A complex prion-inducing compound is isolated as the cause of the condition and labeled SR427. While these early studies proved to miss large portions of the infected's biological configuration and pathways, this designation remains in use. 2021. Much of the beef herds of North America were culled in an attempt to prevent the spread of the infection. This ultimately proves ineffective. 2023. The first human victims are identified. It is noted that SR427 appeared to have grown more complex in its biology. Infected individuals behave as much as the early animal cases and are quarantined. Attempts to prevent the infection spreading escalate. 2024. No country in the world is without confirmed cases. A global pandemic is declared. Incubation nears completion. Flowering draws near. 2025. Global travel, already restricted, is all but completely halted. Infected individuals are no longer cared for, but often euthanized and incinerated as strained global infrastructure, starved for trade, struggles to keep up. 2026. North America is declared off-limits to much of the world, and mass evacuations already in progress are formalized. By year's end, few uninfected remain on the continent. Reports filter in of bands of SR427 positive individuals raiding settlements for food. Other evidence of complex coordinated behaviors emerges. Military forces are said to be actively culling infected populations within the United States. Records of these activities, if they occurred at all, will remain sealed indefinitely. August 2027. The Gestalt reaches critical mass. flowering begins. Speaking with a single, terrible voice, the infected identify themselves collectively as the Ben-Shirath, the emergent devourer of worlds. The time of reckoning is said to be at hand, and the coming of the harvesters, endless and irresistible, is foretold. The world militaries are mobilized to battle the entity, and the first salvos of thermonuclear weapons are readied. The unknown status of the U.S. nuclear arsenal, however, prevents immediate action. September 2027. Unusually high levels of activity on the transatlantic and trans-Pacific fiber optic cables is detected. After some reticence, the lines are severed to prevent Ben-Shirath from potentially subverting global communications infrastructure. October 2027. Transmission of several U.S., Mexican, and Canadian television stations, long silence, resumes. Numerous entertainment shows, discontinued by the collapse of North American civilization, inexplicably return to the air. Many such shows feature the same cast, now infected, and directly continue plotlines interrupted by the crisis. November 2027. Certain online media servers on what remains of the internet come back online. The former media giant Netflix reports its servers in the US appear to be active. December 2027. A small delegation of individuals exit the North American quarantine zone aboard a cruise liner. They are isolated aboard the Italian naval vessel off the west coast of Ireland. Medical examination reveals that, while all display signs of neural reconfiguration and scarring, none currently test positive for SR427 infection. The individuals describe themselves as emissaries and request to begin negotiations with uninfected governments. March 2028. The first waves of cured individuals begin to emerge around the world. Given how numerous and dispersed these individuals are, the full extent of the infection is revealed to have been far worse than believed. Despite official restrictions, tentative resettlement of North America is begun. Over the next few months, long-separated families and loved ones are reunited, and local society begins to reform. Remaining infected individuals there are said to be reclusive, friendly, and somewhat awkward. October 2028. In a deposition to an international panel at The Hague, Ben-Shirath, speaking through a small group of volunteers, pleads guilty to attempted genocide. Speaking on his behalf, a number of previously SR427 positive individuals described their time as part of the collective. Candace Hall, a resident of North Carolina who spent 18 months as part of the Gestalt, famously states, "Hey, a lot of people were pretty crappy as kids." Faced with the difficulty of imprisoning potentially millions of people, and in spite of widespread protests, the court agrees to a full pardon contingent of Ben-Shirath's continued cooperation. December 2029. Ben-Shirath is granted citizenship of Earth by the UN. The last of those infected individuals with sufficiently autonomous central nervous systems are released from the Gestalt. Around 13 million individuals. Those infected earliest remain part of what the entity describes as a neurological substrate. The nervous systems of these individuals is determined to be too closely bonded with the infection to survive separation. Though, in all but the worst case, a form of what Ben-Shirath calls vestigial individuality remains. January 2030. Ben-Shirath, or Ben, speaks publicly for the first time since the trial and his subsequent speech at the UN. The entity professes to be very sorry for its previous actions. Cures for several major diseases, as well as a host of modified fast-growing food crops and carbon-sequestering organisms, are offered by way of compensation. The interview was broadcast live, simultaneously on every major news network, in every language spoken on Earth. Ben professes a love of HBO fast food and opera. February 2030. Preparation for the coming of the harvesters, who Ben describes as the worst kind of jerks, begins in earnest. Large organic fusion reactors are seeded in oceans around the world, and the stalk of the nascent space elevator, Jack's Ladder, reaches 1 kilometer in height. January 2031. Acceptance of Ben as a part of daily life continues. The entity continues to work with psychologists in attempting to reconstruct the personalities of those most completely subsumed within its being, to mixed success. It is estimated that 45% of global television and film media directly stars at least one instance of Ben-Shirath, who is now believed to be the world's third largest economy. Despite growing acceptance, many continue to believe that all those once infected remain part of Ben-Shirath, and that all displays of individuality on the part of such people are merely a ruse, and part of the Harvester's plans for Earth. Minor civil unrest and occasional terrorist incidents persist for decades. April 2075. An observatory on Phoebe detects a fusion drive signature from 0.8 Li from the edge of the solar system, far beyond the distance so far reached by any of Earth's life ships. The object, artificial in nature, is some 6 kilometers wide and appears to be performing a braking maneuver at an estimated 125 G. 21st of August 2084. The Earth Harvester Wars begin. End of story. I'd quickly like to thank the T5 peeps: Cold War Boomerwaffen, Severin Cerberus, Bushmaster 177, Henry the Red, Caspar Arnholtz, Cold War Boomerwaffen, Elijah Silvercross, Dragzoon WRE, and Severin Cerberus. Thank you very much.